Welcome to the Photography is My Passion podcast. With Anthony Morganti from OnlinePhotographyTraining.com. This is episode 18 of the Photography is My Passion podcast. The podcast is back after a relatively long hiatus. Many of you know my youngest son Joe became ill about a year ago. Thankfully, he's back to good health and has resumed his normal activities, and things are pretty much back to normal around my house. So I decided I wanted to bring the podcast back. It's still going to be a weekly podcast, but there are going to be some changes. I was looking at some stats, and I saw that about 75% of the people that listen to the podcast do just that. They listen to it. They don't really watch the video. I suspect that's because they're listening while they're driving, or they're listening while at work, or they're in some type of situation where they can't be staring at a computer screen or television. Unfortunately, because photography is such a visual medium, I feel that the podcast should be a video podcast, but I am going to tweak it a little bit and change it slightly in that I'm going to gear it for those people that only can listen. So the video part of the podcast will really just be there to support the audio part of the podcast. So if you're a listener and not a watcher, hopefully the podcast will become more valuable to you because you don't necessarily have to be looking at a computer screen, watching the video to understand what I'm talking about. Now, right now, you could see there's about a dozen slides paging through of landscape images, and there's a reason for that. And the reason being is the subject of today's podcast. Specifically, I read an article recently that kind of hit home with me. To be cliche, I'm searching for a way I could bring my photography to the next level. But the problem is, well, what is the next level? It's really not defined. Sometimes you feel like you need to progress in your photography, but you really don't know where to go. You don't know what is that next level. Where do you want to, or what do you want to do that will make your photography better? So, I subscribe to this magazine. It's called Photo District News, often called PDN. And they have a blog, and their blog is called PDN Pulse. And there was an article on that blog by a New Zealand photographer, A.B. Watson. And his article kind of hit home with me, and I want to share it with you, and I'm going to read it. I hope you don't mind. And those of you that go to my website, in the show notes below this podcast, I'll have links to this article on the Photo District News blog and also to A.B. Watson's website so you could see what he's all about and what Photo District News is all about. Anyway, the title of his article is "What is Missing from Photography?" It has been bugging me for a while. There's just something that is missing from photography. From my personal work to the majority of photographers out there, I'm talking about photos on your feeds, be it personal to commercial. It has been bugging me, and I finally found out what it is. What is missing from photography is stories. A disclaimer, I'm not talking about photojournalism or anything relating to the Pulitzer Prize. Those are photos with real stories that are important and need to be shared and told to the world. The photography I'm talking about is the personal, the creative, the artistic, the majority, the mainstream. When you see a photograph that is of a chair in a room or a model in a pose, I think to myself, that's aesthetically beautiful, but aside from that, I don't give a crap. There is no personal aspect to the image, no story about why that chair is there or why the model is posing or sitting or whatever, except to maybe sell it. A landscape is a landscape. I can see why people find them boring to look at. But if it was a landscape of a forest that was cut down a year ago to make way for palm oil farming, then it becomes an important story. What I'm getting at is we are overwhelmed with imagery, saturated so much that we only connect and pay attention to the things that resonate with us. If you purchase a new car, phone, or camera, I bet that all of a sudden you would notice that everyone around you has that object. It's not that suddenly everyone got one, it's that you started to notice them because you invested in that brand and it had become important to you. A few weeks ago you didn't see them, but now that this item resonates with you, you take notice. The same goes for mainstream photographs. I see a lot of imagery, but none of it resonates with me on a personal level. The majority of it is just aesthetically pleasing, nice, pretty, beautiful, and because of that, the majority of imagery out there isn't memorable. What are all the stories that connect with our humanity? My work is mostly void of people. I mainly take landscape and still life photographs. The meaning behind my work is about disconnecting from technology, switching off the phone and being in the moment. It's about mindfulness, being zen. Now, looking at my work, you wouldn't get that information or context by merely looking at it. It's just aesthetically pleasing. I'm not perfect. My work is completely void of message or story. My work is a good example of what not to do. I have much room for improvement, and I desperately need to take my own medicine. So how does one include a story to an image? To tell a story, you could include a blurb. You could tell a story with a photo series or essay that has narrative or story structure. Your image could have an article, music, sound, or dialogue with it. I love reading blurbs and photo galleries, giving me context behind the work or what the artist is striving for with their imagery. I love it when someone adds a story or description below their Instagram post. It gives the photo more power and humanity. Think of Humans of New York. If all you saw were the portraits, you would think that's a nice photo and move on. But there's a whole lot of text below it that is related to the person in the portrait. Those stories are deeply personal, and that is why so many people resonate with Brandon Stanton's work. Because the photographs have a personal story attached to the imagery, they make us sympathize and relate to the subject. If only more photographs had a story behind it. I'm not saying that taking photographs for the act of taking photographs is bad. I'm not saying that a nice landscape is meaningless or an editorial spread is worthless. I'm not saying that at all. I just love to get a little more context to why the image was taken. If the images you capture are because they are aesthetically beautiful, then you have succeeded in sharing that meaning and value. If your images are just for you, then great. Take everything I said with a massive grain of salt. Personally, I'd love to know the story, meaning, and history or feeling behind your photograph. Express what you see or feel through your lens. Make me feel through your imagery and message. Share the story, your story. Okay, now that, again, was an article by the photographer A.B. Watson. He's from New Zealand, and that was where I read it in the Photo District News blog called PDN Pulse. It's also on his personal website. I agree with a lot of what he's saying there. I don't necessarily think everything he said there is applicable to me. Specifically, he's talking about like a Humans of New York type thing that he mentioned, where you have a photograph of a person, and some might argue it's not technically a street photograph, it's a portrait, but it's a photograph of a person in the street, and then below it, the photographer tells a story about that person, and often it's a very moving story. Well, personally, I don't necessarily want my photography to have text below it. I remember reading an interview with Neil Young, and many of you, I'm sure, know who Neil Young is. And the interviewer asked what a specific song meant. And Neil Young said, I'm kind of like Bob Dylan. I don't want to tell you what the song means. I want you to drive your own meaning from the song. And I kind of feel that way about my photography, in that I don't necessarily want to explain what the picture is about. I often say I want someone to look at my picture and I don't want them to think. I want them to feel. To me, it's a more primal thing than thinking. That is feeling. And that's what I'm striving for. And as you're looking at these dozen or so images page through on this video, they're all landscape shots, a couple cityscape shots. I think you'll agree they're aesthetically pleasing, but they don't necessarily make you feel. And this is where I stand, is I've kind of have the capability technically to take a nice aesthetically pleasing shot, but I'm looking for more than that. Now, unlike A.B. Watson, I don't necessarily want to put a blurb below each picture saying something about the environment or saying that this shot was taken 10 years ago and now that is plowed over and there's, a housing project there or something like that. I don't necessarily want to do that. As a matter of fact, I have a street photography blog called iambuffalo.us, and I actually toyed with the idea when I was setting it up whether I should put captions under the pictures explaining what the picture was about or where it was taken or something like that. And I actually decided against it because, again, I want someone to look at it and I want them to feel something. I don't necessarily need them to be thinking. Maybe the feeling will elicit them to think later, and that is better, in my opinion. Instead of thinking of, that building looks old, I wonder when it was, built, maybe they'll look at it and they'll feel something and they'll wonder about the history of that area or something like that. So my point is that this is something that's difficult to put into words. But I do want to, at least for my photography, try to get people to feel. Now, I think one way I could do that without captions or without adding some script below the picture or along with the picture is to incorporate humans in my shot. And you can see all these shots are devoid of any persons. And I think that, at least for me, now I'm not saying this will work for everyone or this will be your signature photography style, but I think for me that if I could take a specific landscape shot and make it aesthetically pleasing as possible, but have a person in the shot, that it might help me elicit feelings from people that look at the shot. Let me explain. Let's say I had a beautiful landscape shot and there were, technically it was perfect. I had nice leading lines. I have, this perfect rule of thirds, whatever. But I have a person in the shot and they're in the perfect rule of thirds point of intersection, leading lines leading to the person. Everything's perfect as far as the technical part of the image. Well, what if that person... Well, let's put it this way. The image would probably elicit different feelings if that person was a man compared to if that person was a woman, compared to if that person was a child. So right there, just having a different gender or age of a person in the shot, I think could elicit all different types of feelings, meaning I could have a child in the shot and it might elicit some type of feeling from a person. But then again, if I have an elderly person walking with a cane, obviously elderly walking with a cane, that would elicit a different type of emotion from the person looking at my picture. Conversely, if it's a man or woman, that would, again, maybe elicit different feelings between the two. Also, a thing that is often called gesture. What is the person doing? Let's say I had a woman in the shot and she's looking down at her feet. That might elicit a certain type of feeling. On the other hand, what if she's looking up at the sky? That's a whole different maybe feeling that would be elicited from anyone looking at the image. So my point is, I think for me, for my landscape images, if I could try to incorporate people and try to have the person having a gesture that is complementary to a feeling that I'm trying to portray in the image, I think that would work for me. Now, I bring this all up. Maybe you are where I am. You're wondering what you could do to make your images better. And maybe you could come up with something. Maybe it isn't a person. Maybe a person wouldn't work for you. Maybe a wild animal would work for you. Or maybe even a pet, a dog, a cat, something like that. Who knows? It could be weather. It could be light. Light to new photographers is very underrated. Contrast and shadow. How does it play in the image? How does it play with the elements in the image? That is a whole nother way you could go. You could take a cityscape shot and it's a very bright sunny day, but then again on a stormy day, it looks totally different. It's going to bring a total different set of emotions from the person looking at the image. High contrast light with very dark shadows, very bright highlights. That could do something else compared to filtered light on a cloudy day. So again, there's all these different types of things you could do that hopefully would help bring your images to the next level. And finally, I just want to talk about something where I got caught up with, and I think probably some of you did too. It's kind of like getting that instant gratification of likes. And I'm not blaming Instagram or blaming, 500px or something like that. This is just me talking from my experience. For a while, I'd be putting images on 500px, and those of you familiar with it know that the more people that like it or favorite it or comment on it, it gets a rating, and the rating goes up. And to me, anything that was rated under 95 was, quote, a failure, meaning that picture, I failed in that image. If that image got above 95%, then, or 95, I don't think it's a percentage, I think it's a rating up to 100. If it got up above 95, then I thought that picture was a success. Similarly, if I post an image on Instagram, if I get over 200 likes or 500 likes, whatever, then that image is a success. Below that, well, I kind of failed on that image. I'm not resonating with the audience. I think that is a false thing to follow, meaning these likes on Instagram. A lot of people, when they're looking at images on places like Instagram or 500px or any of those photo sharing sites like that, I think they get kind of geared to just looking at the image aesthetically. So the image looks aesthetically beautiful and or technically perfect. So a lot of times I'll post animal images on Instagram and they're probably technically perfect and people will like it. Post a landscape and it's aesthetically pleasing and people like it. But beyond that, as A.B. Watson says, it's aesthetically pleasing, but so what? I mean, really, it's really not what I want it to be. So basically, I guess it comes back to I have to take photographs that satisfy me, not necessarily are something that would garner a lot of likes on Instagram or give me a rating between 95 and 100 on 500px. So I thought this was interesting. It kind of resonated with me. Again, in the show notes below this video portion of the podcast on my website, I'll have links to this article if you want to read it. And I encourage you actually to read that blog, the PDM Pulse blog. It's part, again, of Photo District News magazine. It's an excellent blog. They have a lot of good articles there, and I really do enjoy it. And welcome back to the podcast again. I'm sorry it was on hiatus for so long. And next week, not really decided what we'll talk about, but we'll talk about something else. Thank you, everyone that watches my videos and listens to my podcast. I truly do appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys soon.